For months after the Columbus citizens were returned, humanity watched the border, but everything was quiet, almost too quiet. They expected a whole bunch of uproar. They expected the Columbia to come at them, but nothing. At least, not on the outside. As inside Columbia territory, things were not exactly quiet. Celebrations were absolutely constant for weeks as the lost were returned home. The parties didn't last as long as people thought they were, as each of the lost had been brought home to their respective house for questioning. Each time they were questioned, the lost ones would always mention how kind and generous the humans actually are, giving them food, shelter, and above all else, life. Each house was told over and over again how the humans never forced them to do anything outside their initial move to the reserved areas for them. They informed the leaders about how most requests were filled eventually. They had more than enough to survive, and the humans started to show more of their own culture. Whenever the humans showed up, they would gladly play some sort of Kalumbra game, though they would end up learning a human one in turn. When asked to show them one, the best example they could show was a simple deck of cards. With such a simple item, or in this case, 52 simple items, one could play a multitude of games. When asked to explain them all, they continued to talk and talk as most leaders had to yell, "Stop!" by the fifth or sixth card game as they were getting confused on the rules. Large houses didn't want to hear any of this, as humans were slaves, food, and nothing more. Those that would promote the positives of humanity are punished, sometimes publicly. Larger houses only sought out riches, rank, and glory. Nothing else matters to them. And because of that, the idea of peace is inconceivable. Even inside the council chambers, they screamed for war. Many of them brought their points out, and the points were not exactly unfounded. Humans had, in fact, killed thousands, hundreds of thousands, with their own dishonorable tactics by Columbar standards. Humans had taken entire sectors away from some of the largest families, costing them more than just personnel, but also equipment and definitely territory. Even a few smaller families were nearly broken because of the humans' tactics. That was their primary argument. Now that they know how the humans defeated their forces, they have the ability to strike back at the humans hard. Most of the strongest houses begin to insist on an aggressive stance, yet at the same time, they always wanted smaller houses to commit a much, much higher percentage of personnel and equipment, and the smaller houses would always decline, but not for the reasons one may think. The smaller houses still celebrated the arrival of their lost personnel. In every instance, at least one of the inheritors of the house was returned. Male, female, didn't matter. Not only were they unscathed, not only were they healthy, not only did they still sing the praises of the humans' respect for their species, but they had brought so many wonderful items and knowledge with them. The great High Grand Leader knows this more than any other. Upon receiving the reports from his secretary, which had gone to retrieve personnel from his own house, of course, but was also sent to keep the other houses from raiding the planet and stealing from all the other houses. After receiving all the reports, the Grand High Grand Leader demanded to have an audience with Doc. Upon entering the council chambers, he was shown to where he would stand, while the great High Grand Leader addressed him. "You need not worry for your safety, young one. You are simply here to confirm the weight of the Secretary's words. You were once a simple orderly for the medical professionals on your ship, is that true?" "Yes." "Upon loss of your ship, you were taken into human custody and kept on their home planet, is that true?" "Yes." "While you were under their watch, you began to receive interrogation, is that true?" "Yes, but it wasn't much I could tell them they didn't already know. Pausing and thinking about this, he continued, They then asked you a question about your worth. Yes, they asked me if I would like to become a full doctor. Oh, that is, they that is what they call their high healers. You accepted this, and they instructed you. Yes, on how to heal humans effectively, and of course, how to heal Calumbra effectively as well, far beyond anything I had trained before. That much is clear, as you saved the lives of many of our people. He then raised himself up to address the whole crowd. Everyone in this chamber is to know of this one's risk of his own life to save those not of his house. There is at least one young female that is alive only due to his actions. Let it be known here and now that this young one is to be given the title of High Healer, and he will be placed in the Grand Healer Sanctuary to save even more lives and to train our other healers what you have been taught. The crowd applauded and cheered at one achieving this rank at such a young age, though they didn't realize his reassignment was just a way to have him close to the great high grand leader so he could simply be called for any simple trouble. Before the cheers could calm down, a snake from one of the largest families rose up to be heard. Before this young one leaves, I do have an inquiry for you. There is a rumor I would like you to settle, and I believe the answer is needed to be heard to this council. A few others realized what was going on before he was even asked, and they all listened with the answer with great anticipation. Is it true that a human has impregnated one of our females? Those that had not heard of this rumor were shocked. Their eyes widened, they straightened up, and they were paying full attention. The great high grand leader had to rise again with his hood flared to calm the room down. Yes, it's true. The entire council immediately went into uproar, so much so that the Grand High Leader slammed his tail onto the ground with a strike so hard that the weight shook the entire room. In an attempt to control the room, the council member continued, How many of those hairy bipeds force themselves on the female to ensure conception? He was trying to hide his smugness as he believed this would force a call to arms. Doc simply looked and replied, None. What? None. The humans detest the practice of forced mating. In fact, they have many laws against it. There is no possible way that one of our females would consider mating with one of those creatures. The entire room was getting uncomfortable with the conversation, but nobody interrupted. She didn't mate with a human. You just stated that she has children with human. Yes, she did. The council member was confused along with everyone else. The Grand High Leader decided to take over the conversation. Young one, do not play us for fools. You have the position of High Healer now, and you stand before me. As such, you need to explain exactly what you are speaking of very clearly. Gladly, Doc said. You see, human medical technology is far beyond ours. The council began to stir, but he continued before they even had a chance to say anything. This was required because actual mating between the young lady and the human she chose is not physically possible. He let that stew as it seemed to calm the council down. Basic physical differences, physiology, makes a direct mating impossible. The secretary next to him, Excuse me, but we have reports from our warriors forcibly mating with human females without issue. It is not so simple the other way around. You see, there is an aspect that the warrior caste is a bit ashamed of. Though it is normal for them to consume the mating appendages to increase their own virility, They never mentioned the differences in said area. What I have found is that the human males only have a single mating organ. The council seems to chuckle at this, yet Doc continues. Yet their mating organ exceeds ours on average of 14 times. They're no longer laughing. The one that had children with the young lady has a factor of 16. This makes mating impossible without causing irreparable damage to the female. He took a breath to let the information sink in and also to allow his throat to make sure it didn't squeak. This was compounded by the fact that a female columbra's internal reproductive structure is designed to retain genetic material until ovulation. Human reproductive material does not have a long enough half-life. This is why our warriors were unable to impregnate human females. Without the chemical signal of ovulation, our genetic material does not become active. In order to facilitate reproduction, the correct way has to be found. In such a case, the window of opportunity for this activity, for this conception, was only 30 hours every 6 months, half a planetary rotation in their terms. The options for conceptions were placed in front of the young lady to decide what option she would take. It's her body, after all, and that is what the humans recommend. I personally recommended that she chose in vitro fertilization, a concept that our species considered about 2 centuries ago but never implemented. This would be a clinical procedure in which fertilization is performed outside the body and then implanted into the female. Even for humans, this has a very low success rate, yet it is still widely used. So the young lady was still fully untouched. The Grand High Leader said this, more of a proclamation than a question, as he was trying to calm down the council. Many of them seemed as though they were actually going to strike out of their locations. Yet Doc continued, No, at least not fully. Before the council could even ask any questions, he continued. The young lady did not want to have children without having the pleasures of intercourse. Then again, who would? So instead, the humans built a device to stimulate the act of mating. The device was used to great effect to ensure that the young lady felt all sensations required to ensure chemical and hormonal release. The injection of genetic material seemed to be quite pleasurable to her, and it is my understanding that building devices for humans to enjoy such sensations is of common practice as well. One of the councilmen injected, You observed this? It was required as I was a part of the research team, and I can say that the young lady had no issue with the device at all. I, however, fell victim to my own biology. He paused as he was about to say something that was embarrassing and everyone knew it. As we know, all of our mating instincts will activate upon this sort of visual stimulation. When it became clear that I was having issues, a couple of human females, they gave me a hand or two in order to subdue my compulsions, even though the council was murmuring, even though some were chuckling, others seemed deadly serious. The secretary asked, And this produced mixed offspring? No. This produced 5 offspring. The council was immediately shocked at this news, but a quick talk amongst themselves, they realized that 5 might be on the high end, but having only 1 or 2 offspring per birthing is very rare for a Kelpter female. Before the council can ask any more questions, the Great High Grand Leader came in. Before we continue, do you have any proof of these words? I did, the doc said. Before one of these family's warriors destroyed my clinic, when they tossed another warrior on the ground The result of explosions of blood and entrails destroyed the files. He then reached into his satchel and pulled them out. This is what is left of them. One of the secretaries went and retrieved the folders that are now painted red with dried blood. Seeing this, do you have anyone who can testify that your words are true? Yes, there is one. 2 days later, Cookie is being brought into the council. He was surprised to see Doc was waiting on the side of the chamber, nodding with approval at Cookie's arrival. They seemed happy to see each other. The secretary, at least one of them, you have been summoned to confirm details given to this council. Seeing that Cookie was scared out of his mind for actually being in the council chamber, the great high grand leader wanted to get words without any type of fumbling, so he spoke. Calm yourself, young one. This is a simple inquiry. Firstly, we know you were held by the humans with Doc. Is this correct? Yes. Your position was that of culinary. Is that correct? Yes. During that time, were you aware of the young lady? Yes. When she chose a mate, was that mate human? Yes. Are you aware of the offspring of the young lady and the human? Yes. Are you aware of the methods in which this was accomplished? No. How many offspring does the young lady have? Did she have in one birthing? 5. What was the relationship with you and the young lady or her offspring? I cooked their food, played with the kids, basically became a second father when they were around. You cooked for them. What does that mean, cooked? Explain. Cookie straightened up, realizing he was now in his own wheelhouse. Humans love to eat. The fact that they cannot eat enough to sustain themselves for a month like we can means that they have to eat quite often, though not in large portions like us. Because they eat so often, in fact, the humans like to have a multitude of flavors as not to become bored with the rations. There's also the fact that their sense of taste is far beyond ours. You know this as fact. Absolutely. Whenever I shared a meal with humans, they would always say that has a kick to it, which is a human's polite way of saying that there's far too many spices used. Whenever I consumed foodstuffs prepared by them, the taste was very subtle, very light flavor, though the flavor I could not replicate was fear. Do they not hunt their prey? Yes, they do, but eating any type of rations that have not been heated up to kill up viruses or bacteria is very rare. To that end, cooking, as they call it, is the act of preparing a meal for consumption, primarily by heating it up, adding spices, layering other flavors, and then when it is complete, its flavor is savored, chewed on, as they say, by moving their jaw up and down, and enjoy before they ingest it. Everyone paused, confused a little, as they listened close. Many of them had heard about this, but to hear it explained in such a way has put them in a state of almost shock. Are you still able to cook items? Yes. However, I am very limited on spices at the moment. At that point, Cookie is sent off to prepare a meal in order to demonstrate human cuisine and taste. During that time, Doc was sent to his new job, and now that he has proven that he's been 100% honest with his words, no one will question him. As the great high grand leader is brought his first ever plate of human style food, he enjoys the aroma that fills the room as the plate is brought in. Everyone in attendance is so hypnotized by the aroma that they unconsciously get closer to it. Cookie apologizes for the wait and again apologizes as he's low on seasonings. The slab of pork left over from the pig roast was grilled, drizzled with some barbecue sauce after being marinated in white wine. All of this with a very light dusting of salt and pepper. The great high grand leader looks at the small portion and almost sneers and scoffs at it before Cookie reminds him to chew before you swallow. Hearing this, the great high grand leader has to remind himself to rehinge his jaw as he raises the plate up and tilts it and slides the pork chop into his mouth. He bites down on the meat before it goes down into his gullet, releasing the juices. His eyes go wide and his tail shoots up into the air. Everyone waits as he turns and tries to chew the meat and eventually swallowed. This is what humans eat? This is a very simple dish. Most are much more flavorful than this. Licking his lips. Those lucky bipeds. He gets up to leave, but before he does, he leans over and looks over at Cookie. You are my new head chef, he says right before leaving. About a dozen sectors away, a distant Calubra sector sits nearly empty. Only a half a dozen ships are in it, and they're all sitting on a random space station, awaiting their cargo that's coming up from the surface of seemingly a dead world. This is just another day for them in the sector, a sector of little importance except to those who are eking out a living by hauling the ores out. Life for them is harsh and boring, and it's always that way from day to day, except for today. Today is a very different day. Across the sector, unknown ships begin to jump in from unknown space. Ships of all shapes and sizes seem to appear almost out of nowhere. Normally, ships would come at the edge of the sector and come on in, but no, they're jumping inside the sector. All of them are armed, with far too many of them to even think about fighting. And before they can even call for help, they find that their communications are completely jammed. Then, from the ships that are jumping in, as even more seem to blink in around the sector, a hail comes into the station. Looking at the signal, they can tell that it's coming from one of the largest cruisers, now perched approximately 114 kilometers away from the station. Its turrets already aimed right at the station. They realize, had it fired, they'd only have a few moments before kablooey. A translated voice comes in over the bridge, along with the view of a human captain in military clothing. This is Captain O'Neill of the human cruiser Lost in Translation. I need to speak with whoever's in charge. This is Station Commander Collier of the House of Dingus. The human captain immediately grabbed the bridge of his nose, trying desperately to keep his human professionalism. This was near impossible as the entire bridge crew was barely hanging on to their own professionalism. Opening his eyes, he had to block the smile that was forming due to the sight of his helmsman with his head down and his shoulders bouncing up and down as he tried desperately not to make any noise as tears rolled down his face. And this alone made the captain nearly lose his composure. Listen, Captain Dingus, I'm going to just say this one time. You've got one planetary rotation to secure personnel and equipment and have this sector cleared. This territory now belongs to humanity. And if we refuse, then my battle group will simply destroy your station, kill everyone on your planet. The choice is yours. You can either save yourself and your crew, or I can let my people use you and yours as target practice. Outside, the commander looked and he realized that every human ship had either rotated their turrets or turned themselves towards the station with their own fixed munitions, and had got a targeting solution on them, or the closest cutlery equipment. The choice is yours, Dingus. Just know that if any of your ships even target ours, we will have no trouble ending a dingus like you. Ending the transmission, Captain O'Neill stopped and turned to ask a question. However, this question made the entire bridge crew lose the last bit of composure they had. He turned to his executive officer and said, Dingus? Seriously?